Welcome to today's lesson where we are going to measure angles using a protractor. We are going to measure angles using a protractor, which is also known as half disc. Before we measure the angles, it's important we understand the protractor and how it measures angles. So a protractor is a device that is used to measure angles using units known as degrees. When you're measuring angles from the left side, we use a scale known as outer scale. It's called the outer scale because you can see the zero is on the outside, on the outer side. So we grow with an angle from 0 degrees, 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 degrees. So the first line you are seeing here is showing from 0 to 10 degrees, an angle of 10 degrees. Then we move to 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 50 degrees, 60 degrees, 70 degrees, 80 degrees. Remember, up to 89, all those angles which are in between 0 to 89, we call them acute angles. So an acute angle, remember in the earlier lesson we said it's an angle that is less than 90. So when you measure from 0 up to 89, we are measuring acute angles. So when you reach 90 degrees, which is called a right angle, after we leave the right angle, we move to what we call obtuse angles. So from 91, we grow with those degrees, 92 all the way to 95 to 100, 110, 120. Remember now these are called obtuse angles, which are more than 90 but less than 180. We move to 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, then finally 180. If you remember in the earlier lesson, we said that a straight line has 180 degrees, and where we started at 0 and we have finished at 180, and we have formed a straight line here. So when you're using the we are measuring from the left side, we use the outer scale. When we move to measure, when we want to measure from the right side, we use the inner scale. We call it the inner scale because you can see the 0 is inside. So when you are just measuring from the right side, we use the 0 which is on the inner side. So we use the inner scale which has 0 inside. So we grow from 0 to 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shared. You can see there is no 90 for upper and outer scale. We just use that 90. Then we continue with the 100 for the lower scale, for the inner scale, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, and 180. Again, we complete it at 180, forming a straight line. So just to repeat, when you're measuring from the left side, we use the outer scale, which starts from 0 and it grows all the way to 180. When you're measuring from the right, we use the inner scale, which also grows from 0 all the way to 180. So let's meet in the next lesson where we'll be practically measuring angles. Thank you. Welcome back to our lesson where we are going to measure 3 angles from the triangle ABC, which is on the screen. So we are going to use a protractor to measure angle ABC. We are also going to measure angle Bsc and angle ACB. So starting with angle ABC, we have to identify which angle is called ABC. And in the earlier lesson that we did, remember we said an angle is formed when 2 lines intersect at one point. So angle ABC is formed by line AB and BC. Line AB starts from point A all the way to point B and then to point C. So that is the angle we are measuring, that one there. That is the angle ABC, which is formed at B. So that is the angle we are going to measure, angle ABC, which I said earlier that it is commonly referred to, we use this middle letter to identify it. So we are measuring angle B, ABC, which is formed by line AB and BC, where the 2 lines are meeting at point B. So that is the angle we are measuring. So we are going to measure using a protractor, and before we measure, remember there are 2 things that we need to identify. 1, we need to identify the type of angle that we are about to measure. And if you look at the angle we are measuring here, this angle we are measuring here, it is less than 90. It's an acute angle. So whenever we are measuring an angle, before you measure, you try to identify the type of angle you're about to measure. The reason why we do this is because you can easily be tricked by the scale and you get the wrong measurement. So we are about to measure an acute angle which is less than 90. So we expect our answer to be less than 90 because we are measuring a small angle which is acute, an acute angle. So we take our protractor, and then remember, we are going to place it where these lines intersect. They will meet. We shall have to place it at point B, where these lines are intersecting. We are going to place our protractor to intersect at point B, like that. And then we make sure that the bottom line of line AB matches with the outer scale. So we are going to use the outer scale because we are measuring from the left side. Then we shall count from 0 all the way until we meet this line. So we are going to use the outer scale and we count from 0 up to where we meet the second line of that angle. So we grow from 0, we move to 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 35, then move to 40, and then 1 degree after 40, which is 41 degrees. So that angle ABC is 41 degrees. Now after we measure that one, I can record here it's 41, and then we write degrees. We are now supposed to measure angle BSC. Are you able to identify BSC, my learner? BSC starts from point B. Let me try to highlight. It starts from point B, moves to A, point A, and then to point C. So that is the angle we are measuring. So the angle formed at point A is what we are measuring, BSC. So again, I repeat, BSC starts from point B all the way to point A, and then I move to point C. It's also important you look at the type of angle that you're about to measure, and BSC is an acute angle, the angle formed there. So we expect our answer to be less than 90. So when we place our protractor, remember we are supposed to slide it properly so that it comes at point A, and then we align this line to match with the 0 mark, and we are going to use the inner scale because we are measuring from the left side. So we are going to grow with this 0 all the way until we meet this line. So we start measuring from 0, we go to 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 50 degrees. After 50, in between 50 and 60, we know it's 55. Then we move 56, 57, then 58 degrees. So we get 58 degrees. Remember, we are using the inner scale. But what most learners do is they don't mind about the scale they are using, so they just place the protractor the way we have placed it, and then they try to read what they see on the screen. And then when I try to read what I see on the screen, I'm seeing 122, which is wrong because I've not checked the kind of scale, the scale I'm using to measure that angle. So if you say 120, you are wrong because even the angle you're measuring is not an obtuse one, it's an acute angle. And we are going to use the inner scale. So from the inner scale, we grow from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Then before we reach to 60, we have 55, 56, 57, 58 degrees. So angle BSC is 58 degrees. The last angle that we are about to measure is angle ACB. And to identify angle ACB, we just move from point A to point C and then to point B. And that is the angle we want to measure, the angle formed at C, that one. So that is the angle we want to measure, called angle ACB, which is also an acute angle. So to do this, we need to take our protractor. After we take our protractor, we know that we are supposed to place it. Before I place it, I just want to show you how to place it. We are supposed to place it and align it with these two lines. This line AC and CB. line AC and CB, which form that angle called ACB. So I will tilt my protractor, I'll tilt it and bring it to line AC, match it with line AC, proper like that. I tilt so that the 0 mark comes at the base of the line, and I make sure that this point touches point C. And then when I place it like that, I'm going to use the inner scale. So before you measure, you have to know which scale am I using. I'm supposed to use the inner scale because I'm measuring from the left side. So I'll start counting from 0. An angle starts growing from 0. It cannot start from 180. So I grow from 0 to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then at exactly 80. So this angle formed here is 80 degrees. But a learner who is not keen will just place the protractor the way I've placed, then look at what is reading here, and then say that this angle is 100 degrees. These are learners who will not check the scale which they are using. So you have to identify the scale you are using before you measure. Since my baseline was line AC, I have to grow from 0 all the way until I meet the other line, and I meet it at 80 degrees. This is not the only way you can place the protractor. I want to remove the protractor and place it in a different way. So I can use line CB as the baseline. So I tilt my protractor, I tilt it until line CB becomes my baseline. Remember, the two lines forming that angle is line AC and CB. So now I'm using line CB as the baseline. So if I turn it like that, I'm measuring from the right side, and when I'm measuring from the right side, I'm using the outer scale, this 0 which is outside. So I'll grow from this 0 all the way until I meet this other line here. So I start counting from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and I get again 80 degrees. So you'll get the same answer if you're accurate. So we get angle ACB is 80 degrees. Hello, now we want to measure angle PQR. We're also going to measure angle PQs and Qrs. Remember, before you measure any angle, you have to make sure that you have identified the right angle. So PQR, we are going to measure from point P all the way to Q, and then we move down to R. So it's that angle formed there, PQR, that angle formed there. So we are going to use line PQ and QR, those two lines, and one of the lines is going to become our baseline. So when we take our protractor, we have to identify the one line out of the two lines, that is PQ and QR. Which one are we going to use as our baseline? So we can decide that our line PQ is our baseline. So if we decide our line PQ is the baseline, we have to rotate our protractor and then ensure that we place it in such a way that the 0 mark matches with line PQ, which is our baseline. So that becomes our baseline. So I can use a ruler to try to highlight it to make it bold so that you can be able to see it. So that's our baseline, and it's the line PQ. It's the one we are going to use. So line PQ is our baseline. That one is our baseline, and it's the one we are going to use. So with that baseline, you note that when we use line PQ as the baseline, we are going to use the inner scale. We have to grow from 0. We can't start measuring from 180. So we are going to grow from 0 until we meet the other line of that angle, and the other line is here, line QR. So we are going to measure up to here. So we are going to grow from 0 all the way to where point R is. Remember, we are measuring PQR, and R is up to here. So we grow from 0, we go to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 degrees, and then from 50 we count the small units, 51, 52, 53, 54. So we get that angle PQR is 54 degrees. So a learner who will just measure without minding about the scale we'll just place the protractor the way I've just placed it, and then we'll be confused by the scale and just start counting 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126. So we'll start getting wrong answer because the learner has not identified the scale he or she is using. So this is not the only way we can measure this angle, so I want to show you the other way, and this is where we now use, remember we are measuring angle PQR. So PQR, I identify it again. It is this angle formed from P to Q and then to R. Now this time I want to use QR as the baseline, so I use QR as the baseline. So I'm going to highlight QR. It is the one I'm going to use as the baseline. So line QR is what I want to highlight. It's our baseline now. So I want just to highlight it so that you can be able to see it more clearly. So remember we are measuring angle PQR, and PQR starts from point P all the way to Q, then to R, and we are now going to use QR as our baseline. So when I take my protractor, I'm going to place it and match it properly in such a way that it matches with line QR as the baseline, like that. I rotate until the 0 mark matches with the baseline QR, and then I'm going to check the other line here. This is where we read. So PQR, I've matched QR, and now I'm going to check what angle this one reads. So remember this time I'm using the outer scale because I'm growing from the 0 which is outside. So I'm going to count from the 0 all the way up to where we have this angle here. So when I count, I'll count from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, then 50, then I count the units angle, 51, 52, 53, 54 degrees. I get the same answer as I got when I used PQ as the baseline. So there are two ways you could have measured PQR, that is using PQ as the baseline, or use QR as the baseline. Now I want us to measure angle PQS. Remember, before you measure the angle, you have to identify the angle you're about to measure. So PQS is the angle formed. From point P to Q and then to S. So it's a combination of two angles here, these two of them. So we move from point P all the way to Q, from point P to Q, then to S. So we are measuring all of that. So that is the angle we are measuring. So when you are measuring that angle, we can use line PQ as the baseline or line QS as the baseline. So we are going to use one of the two lines as the baseline. So we can start by using PQ as the baseline. So if we are using PQ as the baseline, we are going to take our protractor, then we rotate it in such a way that it will match with PQ. You place PQ in such a way that it will match with a 0 mark, and remember we are measuring from the left, so we are going to use the inner scale. So we are going to start from measuring from 0 all the way to this point here, because the angle is formed from PQ to QS, so this is the other line. So remember we are using the inner scale, so we count 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then we go to 90 and 1 degree after 90, which is 91 degrees. So we get 91 degrees, and that is when we are using line PQ as the baseline of that angle. So I want us to measure the same angle PQS, but this time using line QS as the baseline. So again, just want to identify angle PQS. It's from point P to Q then to S. Then I want now to use this QS as the baseline. So I will take my protractor and then I tilt it such a way that now QS becomes our baseline. It matches with the 0 mark like that. So if I'm using QS as a baseline, I'm going to use the outer scale. Remember, I'm measuring from the right. So I'm going to grow with this 0 all the way until I meet the other line, which is at this point. So I'll count from the outer scale and grow with that 0. Let me place it properly. So we grow from 0 to 10 to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, then to 90, and 1 degree after 90, which is 91 degrees. Get the same answer, whether you measure from the left or from the right, so long as you are using the right scale. So don't rush to read before you identify the scale you are using. So we have measured PQR, we have measured PQS, now we are to measure QRS. So we are now going to measure angle QRS, and QRS is the angle formed from point Q to point R, then to point S. QRS, that is the angle we want to measure. Again, I identify QRS as the angle we are going to measure. So it is formed by line QR and RS, which have intersected at point R. So I'm going to use the baseline as RS. So I get my protractor, I use the baseline as point line RS, this line. I match it properly with the 0 mark, and then since it is line angle QRS and I've used RS as the baseline, I'm going to measure, I'm going to count all the way until I meet this other line here. So this time I'm using the inner scale because I'm measuring from the right side. So I grow from 0 to 10 degrees, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Then after 100, we go between 100 and 110. We have 105. Then 1 degree after 105, which is 106. So a learner who is not keen, after placing the protractor the way I've placed, would not mind about the scale. We just read what he or she is seeing, and if I just read what I'm seeing, I'll be able to see it's 74 degrees, which is very wrong, because the angle I'm measuring is an obtuse angle and it is more than 90. So if you just look at the angle before we even measure it, it's an obtuse angle. So we expect it to be more than 90. So when I place my protractor, I decide RS is going to be the baseline, and then I grow with this line until I meet the other line of that angle. So I get 106 degrees. I can also measure angle QRS using line QR as the baseline. Remember, we have to identify the angle again. We are measuring its angle QRS, the angle formed at R, and it is made up of two lines, line QR and RS, and we have used RS. Now we are going to use QR as the baseline, and then we check the measurement using line RS. So when I take my protractor, I'll place it in such a way that I place it at point R where the angle is formed, and then I tilt until point Q matches with the 0 mark, and then this time I check I'm using the outer scale. So I will grow from QR all the way until I meet line RS and then measure. So I will count using the outer scale: 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Then after 100 I get into 105, then 1 degree after 105, which is 106. I get the same answer. So I think you have been able to understand how to measure angles. Can you do some practice on measuring angles? And let's meet in the next lesson where we shall be working out more questions on angles using parallel lines, isosceles, properties of isosceles triangles, and many other properties of angles.